The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Charlotte was born on July 3, 1860, and her full name was Charlotte Perkins Stetson. It was before she was Gilman. The Yellow Wallpaper was written in the 19th century, 1892. Charlotte had a brother named Thomas Addy. Her semi-autobiography, The Yellow Wallpaper, is the best story of her, and she was a feminist. The Yellow Wallpaper is a semi-autobiography of Charlotte Perkins in which she wrote it based on her own experience. Charlotte and her husband John have moved to a mansion for the summer. This is because she was failing to relish the joys of marriage and motherhood. After having her baby, Charlotte had postpartum depression, which had her very nervous all the time, and then she was experiencing some kind of illness. Rescue is a period spent in an active or leisure with the intention of providing one's physical or mental health. Summary: I added these images that illustrate part of the story. The narrator and her husband John, who was a physician, moved to a colonial mansion with their baby and nanny Mary, as well John's sister, who was a perfect housekeeper. They moved there for 3 months because the narrator was diagnosed by her husband John and her brother, who also was a doctor, with a slight hysterical tendency. It was called that back then. Today is postpartum depression. The narrator was taking a treatment called the Rescue. John assigned her a nursery room that had been renovated. She didn't like the room because the windows were protected with bars, the walls had rings and things, and most of all, she detested the yellow wallpaper that was in. She didn't like the color, shape, and had a weird odor. The narrator could see vivid and violent images in the wallpaper, like a woman trapped in there. She told John, but he said there was nothing. She usually spent all day in that room and had a strict daily schedule. The narrator was forbidden to write because she used to write a lot of things that weren't good for her health. Though she did when John wasn't home. She usually spent a lot of time in the city. The narrator could see or feel things that were happening through the wallpaper. She was anxious and depressed, and was more sensitive and crying all the time. During the night, John used to be sleeping, and the narrator pretended to be sleeping too. But with the moonlight is when she sees the women trapped behind bars. It was getting more visible every day. Then the narrator told John and Jenny. They didn't believe in her because they thought it was part of their nervousness. After a time, she found them looking at the wallpaper. She was becoming paranoid that they could get interested in the wallpaper. She was determined that only she would uncover what was behind it. 2 days before leaving the house, the narrator wanted to help the women on the wallpaper by pulling off the wallpaper around the room. She was locked in and threw the key away, not wanting anyone to open it. Then John arrived, breaking into the room, but the narrator didn't recognize him. Then John faints in front of her. She continues creeping around the room over him. Analysis. Symbol. The woman in the wallpaper is a narrator because she was seeing a woman trapped in the wallpaper, and that represents her emotions and depression. She is being trapped in the depression that affected her so much that she gets nervous by everything. Most of all, she was all day alone, crying and sad. The depression she was going through was making her anxious and nervous. This is why she couldn't tolerate that wallpaper that was ugly for her. Text. This paper looks to me as if it knew what a vicious influence it had. Paragraph 2. This represents that she would get nervous by anything that she looks at, especially this thing that was weird for her. She was nervous and thought that it was looking at her, and then she was getting nervous about it and creating things in her mind. I had got out at last, said I, in spite of you and Jane, and I have pulled most of the paper, so you can't put me back. That's in last paragraph. In this line, she talks as the first person, and she says that it's her by saying that they can't put me back. So, yeah, she felt trapped in. Theme. The theme represents the time when this event took place, and it was in the 19th century, when women didn't have rights and freedom to do and express themselves. Everything they could do was what men used to tell them to do. They couldn't do anything without permission. It is the same woman, I know, for she is always creeping, and most women do not creep at daylight. This is like women cannot do anything during the day, but they can do it at night when men do not look at them, so they cannot say anything to them. Most men's eyes, when you look at them critically, are not like that. They may look at you very expressively, but when you look at them just as features, they are not very nice. This may mean that men can be different in front of others, but they really don't like what you're saying because you don't have that permission to say that, but then you do. So I think this is kind of like that. Conclusion. My conclusion is that the wife is Charlotte Perkins Gilman because she talks as the first person. Also in the text, the wife is the writer. I think that before they didn't have much knowledge in medicine, and that's why John didn't realize that her wife's problems was going to pass soon. Otherwise, she wouldn't make ideas in her mind because she felt in or found something that identified her feelings. She felt trapped in the room and with everyone's opinion that she made a story in her head. Also, she couldn't do much because women didn't have much right at that time, so they used to do what men used to say. In this case, Charlotte was sick and nervous, and then she had a problem because John told her that it was like that just because he was a doctor, so that was his statement. And his brother also